This is Johnny and the Professor. Common sense in senseless time.
Earlier today, the group Project Veritas released a series of audio and video recordings it says were made by someone within CNN. Here's Jeff Zucker telling his employees that no matter what else is going on in the world, the impeachment of Donald Trump is nevertheless the only story that really matters.
We're moving towards impeachment. I mean, don't, we shouldn't pretend, this is going one way, and so all these moves are moves towards impeachment. So don't lose sight of what the big story is.
Listen as a CNN staffer explains that he and the rest of them know exactly what Jeff Zucker wants.
The impeachment stuff, there's new developments every day, more shoes dropping. There's just nothing we can do. If Zucker wants impeachment every single day to be the top story. That's what he wants. Yeah, he wants impeachment. So above all else, honestly. Above all else.
There's a lot of people who are out here trying to just do what they think is the best of journalistic integrity. And then you get on the 9 a.m. call, and big boss Jeff Zucker tells you what to do. And it's you have to, to a certain extent, you have to follow his verdict.
Johnny and the Professor. Common sense in senseless times.
I think it was disgraceful that the intelligence agencies allowed any information that turned out to be so false and fake. And that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do. I think it's a disgrace that information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public. And as far as CNN going out of their way to build it up, it's a disgrace what took place. I'm not going to give you a question. You are fake news. Everybody back there, the fake news media.
CNN President Jeff Zucker actually ordered his reporters to get off real news and back to Russia because, hey, it's a cash cow.
This is Johnny and the Professor.
It's Johnny and the Professor.
Common sense for senseless times.
Where we talk politics, pop culture, and pumpkins. A lot of pumpkins around.
Well, it's funny that this time of the year there are a lot of pumpkins that seem to be still dwelling on people's lawns for some reason. Halloween is a really cool holiday, though.
Do you dress up?
Not in public, no. I generally I stayed on the porch and gave out candy to kids.
Oh, okay. All right. I have to take the girls out to all the grandmas and their neighborhoods, and so they get spoiled. They've turned Halloween into a Christmas. What do I get for Halloween? Well, you used to go door to door and get candy. Now you want presents and this elaborate stuff? No, that's not how it works. I actually tell my kids no. I don't know about other parents, but
I didn't even consider the idea of giving Halloween presents.
Right.
It's just you dress up and go out as kids.
So what's going on in the wacky world of the world?
Well, I think the biggest thing that's happening right now is that there was the Democrats are finally going to allegedly put out a resolution of officially starting an impeachment. They're supposed to be voting on the floor on it.
Now, they've been wanting to impeach him since the day he got elected.
Yes, easily. As soon as I think they were thinking about it as soon as he won the nomination. Well, as soon as they thought he was going to win, when he committed the ultimate crime for impeachment for a Democrat is he beat Hillary Clinton and got the presidency. At that point, he was guilty of a crime that could never be forgiven, and they had to eventually impeach him.
Now, the way I see it, it looks like, okay, between the media and Hollywood and the Democrats, they have, used this psychological projection, accuse him of the same things that they're guilty of and swaying this narrative. It turned so many citizens against him that they're on board. All right, finally, we're going to get him now. All right, it's about time. You know what I mean?
It seems to be. Well, it's really strange about this resolution idea that they're putting forth is that by putting it forth, they're saying that the impeachment inquiry we've been doing so far isn't ethical, isn't right. Because why would you have to make a actual resolution to change it if what you're doing before was okay? I mean, they don't want to admit that, but that is the logic of it. If Schiff is having his little shifty hearings down in the little secret room where the only thing that comes out of it is leaks, then, that was okay. Then why do you need to try to make a change? Why do you need to alter things? Well, because you're not allowing, when the impeachment process has been handled in the past, we have two in recent history. One, of course, is Richard Nixon. The other one is Bill Clinton. It's always been voted on by the floor, and then the the design of it was put forth, and they were always public. I mean, you might have to, do something in case somebody's talking about something that is top secret. But generally speaking, it's not the case. If you're asking the opinion of somebody about a phone call, then odds are they're still basing this on this idea of Trump's conversation with the president of Ukraine, that this was somehow him trying to use his power to manipulate an election.
Didn't he just say, hey, do me a favor, we're looking into this corruption Russian thing, can you look into it, do you know where the server is?
No, that was exactly what he did. And people say, well, my God, we don't let foreign people investigate Americans. I go, we do it all the time. If you're dealing with someone who's in a foreign country, or if the contact's in a foreign country, you cannot just go into that country and investigate. You have to talk to them about doing the investigation. I mean, recently, Bill Barr has been traveling to Italy and to Great Britain as part of a matter and people go, well, he's getting involved. He's not even investigating. All he's doing is opening contacts between Americans. Durham is the gentleman who's doing the investigation, but he's an investigator investigating situations in the United States. It takes the Attorney General talking to that government to say, is it okay for him to come over and question people? And they'll say, sure. But the Attorney General is the official federal representative. So he would have to go and do that. So you always work with foreign powers.
I think that if any American had something like this happen to them, where something they did was taken out of context, or they were just flat out accused of something they didn't do, and then, all of these things happened to them, I think they might change their tune. Like, hey, this isn't right. Where are my rights at? But since Trump's the evil, racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, that it's like, all right, let's get him, regardless of his basic rights.
Well, as far as the way they're handling in this way, he should be. In the past, when we've had impeachment investigations, the president was able to send legal representatives, to be in attendance. They were able to question witnesses.
Right.
And that subpoena power went from both sides. Even the thing they're drawing up now, and the official one will have to see when it actually comes out. But it isn't that, because it'll come out tomorrow.
According to Hillary Clinton, she says it's so damning and so dramatic. It's just horrible, the evidence that they have.
And yet Hillary Clinton was the one who bought evidence from a foreign power, and which had Russian propaganda, and paid money for it to get to against Donald Trump, which was used to get FISA warrants, even though the information was never verified. Yeah, there's no problem. That's the problem that I still think that's the problem. The reason why this impeachment is being pushed forward is because Clapper and Brennan and some of these people, Comey, when this investigation comes out of how they abused their power to spy on the president in his campaign in his early White House, I think people are going to go to prison, and it's going to go back to the Obama administration. I mean, the situation now, as I say, this new resolution they put forth, if the Republicans wish to put forth subpoenas, they have to get permission from the chair of the committee before they can do it. Well, and which is Schiff, of course, and or Nadler, depending on the committee. If they say no, they can't have the committee vote to override the chairman. So in other words, all that happens is they only get the warrants that Schiff or Nadler wants them to have. They can't put forth any other. They can't subpoena other people, unless, of course, they agree with it. And in the current investigation, I was listening to some of the people talking about it. There was people talking, and when Republicans started asking questions, Adam Schiff literally told the witness, "You do not have to answer those questions." Right.
Oh yeah, no, don't answer that. No, that's not right.
No, it isn't, because it isn't an investigation. It's just a sham.
Now, I hear a lot of people that they're always on the fence, or they're the ones that I always say, if you don't stand up for something, you'll fall for anything. They'll say, oh well, both sides are corrupt. And as I'm researching, I'm trying to find what conservatives do or have done that has even come close to the things the Democrats have done. And I can't find. And you being a history professor, you would know better than I would. Okay, you know the history of both parties, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you keep up to date with current things.
Best I can, yeah.
Do they add up? I mean, are they both equally corrupt, as some people like to tell me?
No, the Democrats definitely have their sins weigh out much heavier than the Republicans' sins do. If you want me to find a Republican situation that might have been like this, you could make the argument during Reagan's time, the Iran-Contra scandal. Because, again, we were literally taking money from one enemy and using it to fund a freedom-fighting group in the Contras in Central America. That had a little bit of, and man, Oliver North was involved in that, and he ended up taking the bullet for the administration on it entirely, and he went to prison for it temporarily. So I mean, that was obviously a scandal. Okay. But again, if you're looking over what's happening now, it's this whole. It isn't just the Democrats; it's the deep state. It's these people, these unelected people. There's even a
like who? Can you give me any names?
So we're talking about anybody who is any head of the FBI, the CIA, any administrative position that's put in place. You have a whole federal bureaucracy that comes into existence that can be appointed mostly by the President of the United States, but generally doesn't change because there's tens of thousands of people involved in this. And so there's a Clapper, there is Brennan. They're not there anymore, but they've been replaced by newer people. But they were the ones involved in this whole conspiracy against Trump. James Comey, again, he was head of the CIA. But he's a non-elected official. They're appointed, and until they're removed, they serve as long as the administrations want to keep them. Every diplomat in the world. This is what's coming up in the dealing with the situation with Ukraine. Anybody who's on the Joint Chiefs who's involved in something, they're appointed people. Diplomats are appointed people. And they have opinions about how foreign policy is wanting to be run. Generally foreign policy that keeps them in their job and allows them to have their power. And if we follow that foreign policy, for example, when Trump moved the troops in Syria, there were all kinds of screams from foreign policy people this was a horrible idea. And then right afterwards, of course, we get and kill al-Baghdadi, which is, of course, a big issue in the news right now also today. So
right, they'll bowed to Obama for the whole bin Laden thing, and then, Trump gets this done, and he didn't even try to take credit. He's just like, hey, you know what? I let the military do their job, and what they haven't been able to do under previous administrations. I just let them do what they do, and they got this done. And, Trump shouldn't have done that, and that's horrible. Maybe this wasn't a good thing. Have you seen those headlines to where they're...
I have. They refer. What was it? I can't remember. The paper referred to him as an historic Islamic cleric and head of ISIS.
Right.
This guy's a murdering.
Passes away at age 48.
Yeah, he passes away. It was like when Charles Manson dies. Religious leader and public speaker.
I'm
Charles
surprised PETA hasn't started shouting him down for saying he died like a dog.
Well, and they used dogs. A dog was injured in chasing him down.
Right.
And the people that the news has been complaining about that, saying, "Oh my God, he should not refer to him as a dog." I mean, how do you know he was whimpering? How do you know he's this? How is
right.
that?
Do we have camera footage? Do we have video footage? Are you prepared to release that footage? We're the press. We need to see that video footage. It's like,
no, you don't.
You don't need to see nothing.
You don't need to see anything at all. But the whole point on it is that Donald Trump knows exactly what he was doing when he said that. Dogs are considered a low form in Islam in general because they're generally considered eaters of waste. If a man is praying amongst more fundamentalist Islam and a dog is present, his prayers are void. It's considered sinful. I mean, they're like pigs, but not as bad on it. But dogs are, and there's parts of the Quran and parts of other writings that talk about that you don't having dogs around. So calling him a dog is a way of telling the Muslim world, the radical Muslim world, you're going to die like a dog if you take on the United States, which has a double meaning to it. And the fact they actually used dogs to go after him is even a greater insult. I mean, because he was being chased down by dogs in his little cave where he blew himself up. They go, well, he couldn't have been a coward. He blew himself up. To blow yourself, all you need to do is be brave enough to push a button once. And kill, of course, his 3 young children he took with him as human shields. This guy can burn in hell. He was a horrible human being, and the world is a better place without him being around.
Well, the left, they're making it out like he wasn't all that bad of a guy, and now that he's gone, it's going to be even worse over there.
Well, except we also killed the number 2 guy in the line too, their communications director. So we took out the first 2. So it's going to be at least months before ISIS is going to be able to do anything and put itself back in order. So I mean, it's a big deal. And Trump's opinion is it isn't we try to make peace with you, we'll just keep killing you. I mean, we wiped out your caliphate, and now we've wiped out your leader, and if you stick your head up, we'll just take those off as they go along. Trump just assumes that it's a war against. You can't kill an ideology. If it's a radical ideology that wants a caliphate of the world and is willing to do anything to get it, you're going to have to fight it until Islam changes itself. Islam will have to have its own reformation at some point, and to say we've had enough, we're not going to tolerate. Because if only, let's say only 5% of Muslims are actually violent, then 95% of them aren't. The 95% that aren't need to stand with the 5% that are and get rid of them, to put them down, to put them in jail, to do what is necessary. There's an old saying that, and the reason it sticks around is all that happens for evil to triumph is for good people to stand by and do nothing.
You see the fake news now kind of defending the ISIS guy and radical Islam, but before Trump pursued him and had him offed by our military, they were like, we got to do something about this. We have to quit talking about it and actually do something about it. And so he did something about it, and now it's, anything that he does is bad.
Well, again, you have people whose perspective of Trump is that he is worse than Hitler, and Hitler killed, again, 6-7 million Jews, depending on the numbers, and not to mention responsible for another 10 or 15 million in other ways. So if Trump is worse than Hitler and he kills Baghdadi, then Baghdadi must be better than Hitler because Baghdadi is not as bad as Hitler in their minds. I mean, I'm literally talking in an insane town here. Okay,
yeah,
this is not reality. But this is the perspective they have. They have this people who hate lose the ability to rationally consider things, and there are percentages of the left that hate Trump at such a level that they cannot accept reality at all.
And I keep throwing this in. I sound like a broken record, but we are getting dumber, and I think this is kind of a reflection of that report, that our IQs are dropping. We're doing more stupid things, complaining about more stupid things. We've achieved goals that we set out to achieve, and that's not good enough.
The amazing part about it is we live at the best time in the history of the world.
Right.
At this point, we have the least diseases. We have life expectancy is higher than it's ever been in the past. Poverty rate in the world in the last 20 years has apparently dropped by a third.
We give sanctuary cities to illegal aliens and tent cities to Americans. All right.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense either, does it?
No. So my original request was to find as many corrupt, horrible things that conservatives have done than the whack job left's history. Like supporting slavery, the KKK, Jim Crow,
the big ones, that's the
NAFTA.
Big ones. You're never going to get around those because they have slavery, they have the KKK, they have the
Great Society Act, NAFTA, Obamacare.
All these things that have harmed the people directly. I mean, Richard Nixon and the Watergate break-in, that would be a conservative bad thing that happened.
Okay.
On the other hand,
that's
he lost his presidency over it.
Yeah, that's one thing.
And again, but you can back that up with Bill Clinton lying in front of a grand jury. Neither of them should have been impeached for those. Nixon was a conspiracy, but he should have finished his term. They should have punished the people involved in it. But Nixon, that's a hard one to call though, because Nixon actually did commit a conspiracy to hide it, and I lean toward the fact that if he had been, I always said if Nixon had apologized to the American people, he'd have probably finished his term.
Yeah.
But since he didn't, him being pushed to impeachment was probably the right way to go. Bill Clinton's was wrong. Clinton committed crimes, but they had nothing to do with his office. They had to do with the fact that he's a horn dog and he's a liar.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, he can't really do anything about it. He's just Bill Clinton's mouth is moving. There's a good chance he's lying.
Right.
And so, all those, but he should have never been impeached. The Republicans were wrong about that. But it didn't change the fact there were actually crimes. You talk to people about impeachment, and I go, what are Donald Trump's crimes.
Right. Nobody can really say. Quid
Abuse
quo
of
pro.
power, obstruction of justice. Well, you're not cooperating with our investigations. You're obstructing justice. You're not a Justice Department. You're Congress. You're you are a legislative body. You know, it's just this whole idea is ridiculous.
This is what they'll do. They'll find someone close to who they're after, and they'll comb their background. Oh, you know what? You flubbed on your taxes 5 years ago. You know that? And you sent it through the mail. That's tax fraud. That's mail fraud. He could be doing about 35 years in prison. Now think of what that'll do to your family and to everything you've worked for your whole life. So he did something wrong, didn't he?
Well, that's what it is. Alan Dershowitz has the term that there's a difference between, that's called getting someone to sing.
Yeah.
And using in the terms of prosecution. But if you push them hard enough, they won't sing, they'll compose. In other words, they'll write music, they'll write whatever you want to hear,
right,
so that they don't have to go to jail for 35 years. And this is the ridiculous part about this, is that even with that as a tool of the federal government, we still don't have anybody saying this is a crime that Donald Trump committed. We've gone through taxes, we've gone through Stormies, we've gone through
Russia,
all these different. We've gone through Russia, we've gotten through, first it's it's collusion, which of course isn't a crime, and then it's obstruction, which there was no evidence of it, and now we're on to the president using his powers and doing the due diligence of his office to say maybe we should, if you guys in Ukraine have information about things that were affecting our election involving this server and what Biden and other people were doing, Biden needs to be looked at too. Just because I guess everyone should run for vice president, because then you can't ever be prosecuted for anything, right? Because since Biden's wanting to run for president, he can't be prosecuted now. If he's guilty of things, abuse of powers and stuff, at least he needs to be looked into. And they're going, well, he's trying to get him out as a candidate. Donald Trump would love to run against Joe Biden. Joe Biden can't even put together cohesive sentences hardly anymore. Trump will fillet him if they ran against each other. Like I said, the only one that Trump probably couldn't beat if they put him up would be Tulsi Gabbard.
Is that the one that Hillary said is being groomed by the Russians?
That's being groomed by the Russians, and that alone would make people want to vote for, I think.
I was watching the old Hillary-Donald Trump debates, and she makes almost the exact same quote during those debates about being groomed by Russia, and the Russians want Donald to win. And
it is. It's just, she's not. The Clintons are not. They are devious and they are maybe cunning, but they're not really necessarily that smart. And Hillary is. She really wants to get in it again because she doesn't want the footnote of her obituary to say, beaten
was never president.
Ran for the presidency, was beaten by Barack Obama, and even worse than that, beaten by Donald Trump. See, it doesn't matter what evidence is or how many times the president's people will knock it down. There's always going to be an effort to drive him from the office from the left. And the only thing that's going to stop it is that there's a political shift in the House, and he wins the presidency again, and that may stop it enough to at least let the Democrats try to fix their party before it just goes off the cliff. Who's our guest today? Our guest today is Zuby. Zuby is a hip-hop rap artist. He's internationally known. He was born in Great Britain. He lived his life in Saudi Arabia, though, and is quite an interesting fellow. And he's made his bones recently because he's a YouTube personality and comes across as a moderate individual, possibly even a moderate conservative individual, depending on how you define him. And and what makes him unusual in that is he's an artist and he's also black.
You're listening to Johnny and the Professor. Politics.
This is actually what makes this whole thing so comical.
Pop culture.
This is something that they're going to be prioritizing, in that is diversity. Now this is stupid.
Common sense in senseless times. This is Johnny and the Professor. Common sense in senseless times. contact the show at jpshowfm@gmail.com.
Well, it's Johnny and the Professor, where we talk politics, pop culture, and pumpkins.
Well, our guest today is Zuby, and Zuby is a rap artist, international rap artist, and he's also a public figure. He's a YouTube personality, and he's somewhat of unusual in the entertainment industry because he is, I would describe him as a moderate conservative. Is that accurate, Zuby?
If that's how you want to describe me, I'm happy with that. I tend to just say I'm a free thinker.
Nice.
That is a rare commodity in the world these days.
Yeah, I don't mind too much what people want to label me. Whatever helps people understand it, it's all good with me.
Well, in most cases, it is the case. I mean, myself, in some ways I'm conservative. In other ways, I'm extremely liberal. For example, I don't care what people do in their bedrooms.
No.
It's none of my business. As long as they're not doing it on my front yard, I might have a problem with doing it on my front yard. But other than that, I'm pretty easygoing about things.
Yeah.
Well, I recently watched your interviews with Candace Owens, and I also saw you on Dave Rubin's show. And,
okay, cool.
But you probably need to explain to our audience about how is it that you are you as a healthy young man with a nice beard holds the weightlifting record for most of the women's categories in Great Britain.
Well, first of all, you did just assume my gender based on my beard. But, yeah, so back in February 2019, I posted a tweet saying something along the lines of, I keep hearing about how there's no biological strength advantage that men have over women in 2019. So watch me destroy the British women's deadlift record without trying. P.S. I identified as a woman while lifting the weight, so don't be a bigot. And it was a video of me deadlifting 230 kilograms, which I believe is somewhere around 510 pounds or so, which is more than the British women's record in my weight class at the time, which was 215. It's probably worth saying that I can lift significantly more than I did in that video, but the point was exactly that someone like myself, who is not even a professional competitive athlete, can in fact take the women's titles in various events due to the biological advantage. So I just wanted to use the own logic and ideology of people who are pushing certain ideas to sort of checkmate them at their own game. And it went massively viral. The videos now had over 2 million views on Twitter alone. I don't know how many on television and on YouTube and everywhere else. I imagine that at least 5-10 million plus people somehow came across that video. So it brought a huge amount of attention towards me and everything that I do, but a lot of people stayed because they realized that there's a lot more to me beyond that one little video, which may have been the catalyst for them to get to know me.
Well, in fairness sake, though, I can quote you here. If some women have penises, then I don't see why some women can't have luscious, thick beards.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard people tweeting about female penises and men having periods and the like, and men getting pregnant and all these other things. So the basic idea that I can't have a beard and still be a woman is quite bigoted, to be fair.
To be fair. So, but in looking at this, I mean, the argument here seems to be, that biology is biology. I mean,
sure.
They're obviously, I mean, it's ridiculous. Human beings are mammals, and mammals have binary reproduction. They have males and females, and they give live birth and they suckle their young. All mammals are the same. I mean, to just simply say to look for someone, reality doesn't have anything to do with your perceptions of it, except from your own point of view.
Well, people are trying to change that now, aren't they? We're reaching a stage in the modern Western world where people are trying to actually subvert observable reality. I'm 5'11", but I don't see why I can't say that I feel and believe that I'm 6'5", and so on documents and any profiles I put out there, and even with how people look at me and treat me, I should be able to then say that, well, I'm 6'5", and so everybody must treat me as if I am 6'5", and if I do a survey, I can put that I'm 6'5", and everything like that. And you've also got this concept of it being fluid. So day to day, I don't even need to be consistent. I could say that, okay, in the morning, I identify as this, and then in the evening I identify as this, and then tomorrow on Thursday I'll identify as something else. And it's one, it's very narcissistic. I think that's kind of what it boils down to. I think part of it boils down to just boredom. But it's silly, you know. People can have their ideas, people can have their beliefs, and ultimately, if people do want to believe whatever they want to, then that's fine. But when you're stepping on other people's toes in the process, or trying to control what other people do or how other people perceive reality, the words they use, the way they want to live their own lives, then you're always going to create a problem. It comes back to what you alluded to earlier about what people do in their bedrooms and not caring. And it's like, yeah, most people actually, you know, maybe there are some people out there who do care, but most people don't. Whether they approve, disapprove, whatever, it's totally irrelevant. But if you're going to go and try to force that upon other people, then that is always when you're going to get a problem. It doesn't matter if you're talking about certain social aspects or politics or religion or lack of religion, whatever it is. Once you start trying to force other people to do things against their will, then you're always going to create friction in society. And that's what I'm seeing here now, when you're having a very, very, very minuscule percentage of people, not even 0.1%, less than 0.01% of competitive athletes does this stuff even apply to. But in trying to sort of push this ideology, you're willing to step on the toes of 50% of the population, i.e. women, because it's not men that this stuff is going to negatively impact, to make this weird ideological point. And it's silly. Most people can see that it's silly. And as far as I'm aware, based on my very small sample size of transgender people that I actually know or who are actually fans of mine, none of them are in favor of it. In fact, if anything, it sort of harms them in a way, because they kind of just want to be left alone to do their thing. They're not trying to force stuff on other people. So when people see like this madness that's going on in sports and in a few other areas, then that's unfortunately how a lot of people are going to think, like, oh, okay, this is what this group of people as a whole is trying to do. This is what they're pushing for, and I don't like this. Whereas I believe that even amongst that minority, it's a very small minority of a very small minority that is pushing these ideas.
But unfortunately, they tend to be a loud minority, and therefore people are terrified to stand up. Sometimes we just need to boldly fight for common sense ideas, I believe. Isn't it a strange dichotomy in the idea that feminists are saying all the pro-women and that women are the victims, and yet can you be a feminist and support trans rights at the same time? Because you're literally allowing men to abuse and take away from women in sports and other events just because a man is identifying as a woman. I mean, it seems like you can't agree with those two things. Seem to be counterintuitive to each other.
There are a lot of oxymorons and hypocrisies across a lot of people's beliefs in a whole bunch of ways. I mean, as far as I'm aware, based on conversations I've had and podcasts I've done, actually, one with a women's rights advocate and one with a radical feminist who hosts the biggest feminist website in Canada, Megan Murphy. I've featured her on my podcast before, and we got into all of this. And it seems like it's caused quite a rift within, I don't know if is feminism even a community, but I guess what you could call the feminist community, because you have the more liberal, trans, inclusionary feminists who are saying, the kind of people who say that trans women are women, trans rights are women's rights, and stuff like that. Men can be pregnant, all these kind of things. That's coming from one side of the end. But then on the other hand, you've got it's kind of more of a derogatory term that people use, but they call them TERFs, so trans exclusionary radical feminists, who are the ones saying, no, we don't want people who are born biological men coming into women's spaces and women's sports and women's changing rooms and all these other things. So as far as I can observe as an outsider, there seems to be a pretty big rift there, which seems to be getting a little bit aggressive. And it's also leading to some interesting and weird alliances, because you're getting a lot of these people who are, these so-called TERFs, actually aligning more with right-leaning conservative people on certain issues, and finding that they're actually getting a better hearing and more fair treatment from people who they maybe in the past thought were in like not on their side, more their opposition. So I don't know. God works in mysterious ways, and sometimes weird, bizarre alignments and agreements can occur off of these different things. So yeah, we'll see where it all goes. But as far as my own approach to it, I mean, again, it just comes down to common sense. I don't think that beyond this issue, beyond a lot of the stuff I talk about, I would certainly like to think is fairly straightforward common sense. But it really doesn't seem to be anymore, which is why it's important for any reasonable people in general, whether they're wherever they sit on the political spectrum, just to be able to say, hey, like, hang on, we can have different opinions on things, but let's not go against reality and biological fact, because if you can't even agree on the basis of reality, then I don't really know where the world is going.
I was wondering, we have a lot of school teachers, like at entry-level schools, like kindergarten, 1st through 5th grade, pushing these young minds to question their identity, their sexual identity, and their gender. Do you have that?
Yeah, they need to stop that right now. They need to stop that, because, see, these are the two boundaries I draw when it comes to a lot of these issues. Is, look, as far as I'm concerned, in most cases, with most things, if you're an adult and you're not harming other people or infringing on other people's rights, for the most part, I'm pretty libertarian. Certainly in terms of legal aspects, it's kind of like, okay, do what you want, but you've also got to bear the consequences of that. From a social perspective, that doesn't mean I approve of everything, but I'm kind of like, look, if you're an adult, if you want to go and remove your ears, you want to go and just remove your left ear, I don't recommend it. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't want to pay for the surgery, but if that's really what you want to do, you can. If you want to go and put a barcode tattoo on your forehead, I don't recommend it. I think it's a bad idea, but you can. But if you're a child, when it comes to children, there's a reason why you have age of consent laws for various things. There's a reason you don't let children drive cars or get tattoos or have sexual intercourse and do a whole bunch of other things. So the idea that you're then going to allow or even push for children to make irreversible changes to their own body, whether that's through surgical means or hormonal treatments or anything like that, then again, you're descending into insane territory. You're descending into a place where someone like myself is going to draw a hard line and call that out, because I'm saying, no, that's not right. That's not correct. I don't think that's moral. I don't think that's ethical. This isn't a political thing, but let children be children. Don't go put weird ideas into their head. Don't cause a boy to question if he's actually a boy, or a girl to question if she's actually a girl. Like, that doesn't do anything good for them. Kids have very wild imaginations. They're very impressionable. They absorb a lot of ideas from adults and teachers and parents and people around them. So you've got to be careful of what ideas you're putting into there. So I do not personally stand for that at all. And also factually, it's very well known that most children who feel that they are not the sex that they want to be, or gender. I don't know how people use these terms. To me, sex and gender are the same thing, and I use them interchangeably. But most boys who have a time period when they're kids who feeling like they want to be girls, or girls feeling like they want to be boys, it's well known that they tend to outgrow that. That doesn't mean that, little Billy, who's 5 years old, he feels like a girl today, maybe because he's got some older sisters and he wants to be a little bit like them. Like, that doesn't mean you go and you take him and you mutilate his body or you put him on hormone blockers or anything like that. That's totally insane. As far as I'm concerned, that's actual child abuse. So I will draw a hard line in the sand on that one.
I often think that it's just a matter of creating greater levels of division as a way for factors to gain more political power by keeping a group fractured and in smaller, making them into victims, so that you can, especially people in the United States on the left, are trying to acquire more power. Mm-hmm. Do you have an opinion on that from a more worldly point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of divide and conquer going on, and the idea that you can just sort of, rather than viewing people as individuals, you can simply split people into groups. You can have some groups that have different amounts of oppression points. So if you are a heterosexual white male, for example, is the archetype of the ultimately privileged person. Whereas if somebody is what's that?
I'm guilty of that. I'm sorry. And
Some of my favorite people are. And then if someone is a trans queer person of color who's maybe disabled or something, then they're viewed at being elsewhere on the hierarchy. And then you can kind of just play all these games where you kind of pit different classes against each other. And, you know, historically, this is something that happened a little bit more along the sort of, what would you call it, socioeconomical divide, so different classes, so upper class versus middle class or peasantry or something like that. Whereas now, you know, people are just doing this. I don't know why it's always gender, race, and sexuality. Those seem to be the three sort of arbitrary characteristics that have been chosen for whatever reason that people always tend to categorize things by. I don't know why it wasn't height and eye color and hair color and IQ and athletic ability. It could have been a whole bunch of different things that people base this on. But once you're able to divide people into any tribal identity, then it makes it a lot easier to keep people at each other's throats, to have people blaming each other, to have people feeling guilty about stuff they didn't do. And ultimately, it serves to manipulate and control people. And I'm not a fan of it. People ask me why I rail against identity politics a lot, and I'm like, because to me, it doesn't do anything positive. It's divisive, especially when you're already in a world where, you know, you're already at a time and a place in the world where people are already, for the most part, treated fairly and equally under the law, and both by, I think, the majority of people. Sure, you'll have issues that arise here and there, which are problems, but I don't think most people in a country like the UK or the USA or Canada are going around on a daily basis sort of trying to oppress or discriminate against people based on any of these factors. And those who are, they're not viewed in a positive light. So yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with all that, but I think it is very much a divide and conquer thing. I don't think it's helpful for anybody. I don't think it's good for people to view themselves as either oppressors nor as victims. Attributing false guilt, attributing false blame. I don't think it's correct, and I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's empowering. I don't think it leads to better communities and better countries. So I will continue to oppose it. Maybe there are some people who strongly disagree with me on that. In fact, I know that there are. But I'm going to disagree with them on this. And as long as they're going to keep voicing and pushing in their direction, I'm happy to keep voicing and pushing back in the other direction. That's why I've become more vocal on a lot of this stuff. Because, again, I just think that people who are more moderate and reasonable and rational and logical need to speak up and not get cowed by a very loud, tiny minority.
Well, interesting. It's the when I look at it in the structure, you're talking about dividing up in the whole identity politics. I often just look at it as it seems to me to be the classical proletariat and the bourgeoisie. But now instead of having a proletariat as just the large working masses, we break them into trans, into race, into gender. Everyone becomes their victim against a illusionary force on the top, which is of course this whatever opposition, which tends to fall into the white heterosexual male. I mean, it's bigotry whether or not which side it's coming out of. If you're looking at a particular group and saying they're all bad, it's bigotry.
Sure.
I mean, it's ridiculous. People have this idea that one group can't be prejudicing against another because one's an oppressor and one's an oppressed. Even putting people in oppressed and oppressor categories, it means you're forming a form of probably bigotry.
This is the thing. It's just full of infinite hypocrisy. It's full of infinite hypocrisy. And just, you know, on a day-to-day, on a human level, like I would love to reach a stage where I can do interviews, I can do podcasts and stuff, and like I've been bored of. I could happily go the rest of my life without even talking about race. Do you know what I mean? Or using the term white or black. Like I really, really do not care. The only reason it even comes up is because we're still living in a time, even more so now than maybe 10 years ago, where for various reasons people are more conscious and more aware, and with certain people almost more obsessed of these ideas. From a kid, literally from a child, I grew up surrounded by people of all different colors, different ethnicities, I had friends from the age of 2 or 3. I had friends from all these different backgrounds and whatever, and it was just like, yeah, these are my friends. Like, these are just people. These are my friends. Like, yeah, we look different. Cool. Like, that's interesting. But the idea that you would form any kind of judgment in any direction simply based off of those facts is so backwards. That's why it's funny that these people call themselves progressive, because I'm just like, this is the most backwards, tribal, silly idea that just doesn't even bear on reality. That's the thing. It's like my life experience, maybe, I'm pretty well traveled. I know way more people than most people will meet in their life, and I've been to more places than most people will go in their life. So I think I've got a pretty decent perspective and understanding of humanity, and it's just not how. It just doesn't. I don't know. The theory doesn't align with the reality of my experience.
I have 2 young daughters, and at the time that I was explaining this to them, they were 5 and 8. They're 6 and 9 now. But we were in the car, and we were listening. I like to listen to the news, and they'd asked a question about something that was going on in the news, and I explained to them what racism was, at least my definition of it, and they really had a problem understanding, because it's so not part of them. They don't see that, or they didn't. So, do you think it's upbringing? Do you think that people categorize because that's what they're taught by their parents or their guardians now, since grandparents raise their grandkids more than parents raise their kids? Is that where it comes from, or where does it stem?
No, I think a lot of it does. Some people would argue that it's deeply innate, and that even babies show racial preference and all this kind of stuff. I don't think that's very true. I think to any degree that's true, that'll just be based on familiarity, right? If a baby is born in Africa to black African parents and everyone around them is African or whatever, and then maybe they're 2 years old and they suddenly see a white person for the first time, they might be confused but that's not racism. That's just a baby seeing something that's totally different.
Right.
Just like if you saw someone who was 9 foot tall walking down the street, you've never seen somebody who's 9 foot tall before. It doesn't mean you're bigoted against people who are 9 foot tall, but you're going to be like, whoa, like you're going to give them a look like, oh, that's different. So to kind of base your entire worldview off of the epidermis is frankly ridiculous. It doesn't matter which direction. It's the same reason why actual legitimate racism is totally stupid, because that's what they're doing. But also these weird sort of far left ideologies. I don't know exactly what to call them. I guess you could call it race theory, maybe critical race theory. I think that's the academic term. It's also ridiculous because you're just doing the same thing in a different way. And like you've already alluded to, children don't naturally do that. That's not how they're wired. Children will play with, talk to, have fun with, be friends with everybody, as would most adults. This is why I'm not a fan of putting these ideas into kids' brains. I don't like the idea that you're going to have a group of 5 or 6 or 7 year olds in class, and then someone wants to come in and teach them about critical race theory and tell all the young white boys in the class that they have both white privilege and male privilege, and they need to atone for something, and then come and tell the girls that they're somehow victims, and tell the black children or the Asian children that they're somehow victim. I mean, how does that help anybody? I can see the harm.
Right. Well, it does. It doesn't help them at all. Well, we're getting back to the point. We probably need to start wrapping this up because it's just the time involved. I was wondering, though, I'd like to maybe give you some opportunity to talk about. You are, of course, a performer and an artist, and do you have any new projects or things that you're working on that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yes, absolutely. So, so I'm a professional rapper. I've been making music since 2006. I got 5 albums out now and 3 EPs, which you can check out on all the usual platforms: iTunes, Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, Google Play, whatever you use. My latest album, Perseverance, that came out in February, so that's my latest musical project. Beyond that, I've got my own podcast, which is called Real Talk with Zuby. You can get that on some of the aforementioned channels. And I have also written and released my first book this year, which is called Strong Advice, Zuby's Guide to Fitness for Everybody. So it's a fitness book which helps people take control of their mind, their body, their training, their diet, and helps them to hit their goals, whether that's building muscle, burning fat, getting stronger, feeling better, feeling fitter, all of those things. So there's a few different channels and projects that I've been working on and will be working on in the future. The best way to keep up to date on everything is probably following me on social media at Zuby Music, ZUBY Music. I'm also at zubymusic.com. So, those are the main things I've got going on at the moment.
I really liked Lonely Highway, by the way. I thought
thank you very much.
That was an excellent, and I'm not a fan of rap in the past. One I like yours is because it isn't obscene. I mean, it's positive. It isn't killing. It isn't all the horrible things I see sometimes in rap. And Lonely Highway I thought was a very good piece. My wife even liked it, and she's definitely doesn't like any music I like generally. Well, I'm going to really thank you for being here today. It's been an excellent time talking with you here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
This has been Johnny and the Professor. Politics.
This is actually what makes this whole thing so comical.
Pop culture.
This is something that they're going to be prioritizing, and that is diversity. Now, this is stupid.
Common sense in senseless times.